Hello, everybody. I've got the signal that we are live. Welcome to the 1960s Project. This is season 2, week 12. It is week 5 of a series called Her Stories of the 1960s. And this is a place where small memories and large thoughts are celebrated. I am FAYE Paige Edwards. Jerome Page is one of my 2 older brothers, and normally he is in this seat, but because it is Women's History Month, we've put women in the seats. So I'm going to make a few announcements while we wait for everyone to join us. First of all, if you were in high school in the 1960s and you have some thoughts or some memories you would like to share, we would love to have you. So just let me know and I'll hook you up. AfricanAncestry.com loves the 1960s Project, so they are offering a 5% discount across the African Ancestry site. So go on over to AfricanAncestry.com and you can have 5% off the entire site until the end of June. Also, you guys know how social media works. We need likes. We need shares. So please like our Facebook page. Also go over to YouTube. And on YouTube, we need you to like and subscribe. And of course, if you share this all over your social media, it will help us tremendously. So the 1960s Project is celebrating Women's History Month. And I am going to be chatting with my longtime friend, MARILYN Frence Hubbard. There are many years where Marilyn and I don't talk, but when we do, we just pick up right from where we left off. So I was in Florida in January, and Marilyn lives in Ocala, Florida, and she drove several hours to see me. And it was just such a joy to see her, and we hung out with several of our other friends from Detroit. And so I'm moving to Florida in a few months, and so Marilyn and I will be able to spend more time together. Ty, let's bring up Marilyn. Marilyn, hello. This is so great. We're going to start by talking about your family's rural history. Many people who know you may not know you have rural roots because you have come full circle and now you live in rural, horse country, small town, Ocala, Florida. And for those of you who listened last week, I interviewed Dr. Esther McIntosh, and Esther is an ally, and she grew up in a dairy farm in Livermore, Iowa, and she describes her existence there as, quote, unremittingly white. Now, Marilyn, you were born in Lansing, Michigan, and you were the first person in your family to be born in Michigan, and your family is from Manley, Iowa, which ironically is 75 miles away from Livermore, where Esther was on a dairy farm. So how did your family get to Iowa, Marilyn?
Well, my family got to Iowa because my grandfather, Curly Brown, and his brother, Howard Brown, were recruited there to work for the railroad.
For the railroad.
They were living in Arkansas and were recruited from Arkansas, and had 5 children, raised their family there. But the railroad took them there.
Took the railroad. And just a historical note, in 1913, there were only 346 people in Manley, Iowa. And as Marilyn said, the railroad recruited workers. And so by 1920, 1,500 people lived in Manley. 90 of them were Black, and many of them were Marilyn's people. So you were the granddaughter of Curly Brown, and who was your grandmother?
And Elnora Brown, Miss Elnora. That was my grandmother.
Miss Elnora. And tell us more about Deacon Curly Brown.
Well, what I remember most about my grandfather, Deacon Curly Brown, is that he was just an honorable man. And he loved my grandmother. When he was, in his 70s, I remember watching him look at my grandmother with very lustful eyes. He just adored my grandmother and his four daughters and son. He was a lot of fun to be around. We called him Daddy Brown.
Daddy Brown.
And he loved to have his family around, full of jokes, and just an honorable man.
Yeah. The picture that we showed a few minutes ago is actually of the church that he started. And the story of how we got the picture, I'll just say that in the middle of the night, Marilyn's ancestor spoke to me, and I found this picture and said, "You think that's your granddaddy's church?" And she looks at it, and her mother's on the front row. So how old is the church? Is the church still there?
Yeah, the church is about 110 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
And Faye, I didn't mention to you, I showed some of the other pictures to my oldest cousin, who's 85. He knew everybody on the picture by name. Yeah, it brought him to tears. So basically, it looks like at that time, most of the Black people that we knew were related to us in some kind of way in Iowa.
Well, that's what happens, yeah.
My family tells a story that they had, my mother used to always say that she'd never seen more than 50, she'd never seen 50 Black people that weren't related to her. She just always been around the only Black people that she knew were her family. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, when your sister is 3, your family moves to Lansing, Michigan.
Right.
And for our listeners, Lansing is the capital of Michigan. It's small. It's definitely not the big city. And you're born there. Tell me about your mother.
Well, my mother was a very progressive woman. My mother and her sisters were all very smart and ambitious women. And they married men that allowed them to be smart and that allowed them to do them, So they stepped out and did, a lot of political things, activism, leaders in the church. But the men in the family were the wind beneath their wings. But my mother was the first African-American woman real estate agent in Lansing.
And then what is
Mabel French, Mabel J. French.
Mabel J. French, yeah.
And so she was very progressive, a real visionary, and a real leader, not only to the family, the leader of the family, but also to the community. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell me about your Lansing neighborhood.
Well, my Lansing neighborhood was a middle-class neighborhood. It was a mixed neighborhood. We did things there like most kids did. We played hopscotch. We had to be on the front porch when the street lights came on. And what happened there is my dad was very strict and we had to be home, but others could come and sit on our front porch. So our place was the meeting place. I was thinking, as I've been thinking about today, during the early, times of the 60s, I was in love with Frankie Lyman. And, the song Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Little Anthony and the Imperials, they used to come to Lansing. I had my older sister, I can remember they used to play that song called Maybe by the Chantels. And it said something, maybe if I say I love you, you won't go away or something. So I grew up in a neighborhood that was just a few blocks from the Capitol.
From the Capitol building.
From the Capitol building. Lansing is the capital of Michigan.
Yeah. So did you feel the sting of racism at all?
Well, no. What happened to me for 12 years? No. It was, it was until I was until the 11th grade. I went to school with the governor's children. So from kindergarten on, Wendy Williams, who was the daughter of the then governor. We started kindergarten together. And so as I think about it now, the way they reacted to us, my mom and my mom's sisters in the community that my mother was in, we were kind of like their minorities at the time. So we knew the governor. I spent the night at the governor's mansion because the governor's wife was our brownie teacher and our Girl Scout teacher. So it was pretty insulated. And I guess we had somewhat of a privilege. My father worked for the Capitol, at the Capitol. He was a greeter.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody knew him and he knew everybody. And so that opened a door for us. So I didn't feel the sting of racism growing up, even though I come from a family of activists. My family was very much involved in the NAACP, the Urban League, and very much involved with the Democratic Party. My mother, I think she was chair one time of the Women Democratic Women of Lansing. So they were involved, but I never felt.
You never felt it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were telling me a story about, you see your mother as this real estate agent, this political figure, and then you go and see the movie The Help.
Right. Yeah, there had been a picture in our family with my mother with a maid's uniform on and a hat. And she and my aunts and probably my grandmother, they used to serve white folks when they had dinners. And I just saw it as something that they did. But as I look at it and kind of connect the dots now, I think that was probably a launching pad. Again, it was an in. And my mother created relationships and she was able to move from there. But as we saw her in this uniform, it was never even communicated to me that she was the help until I saw the movie. Yeah.
So she becomes a very successful real estate agent. She developed several properties in Lansing. And then your family also invests in property up in northern Michigan in an area called Woodland Park near Idlewild. Describe
Correct.
that area.
Okay, well, Idlewild, we used to call it the Black Martha's Vineyard of Michigan. And it was a Black resort that, all of the entertainers used to come to. Ford Tops, Della Reese, Etta James, Jackie Wilson. And it was a thriving resort community that was owned by African Americans. And once integration began to set in, by the mid 60s to 70s, it started going down because Blacks had other places to go. But at that time, people from Chicago, Ohio, they would come there with their families. And many of the people that I met at that time are still my friends today.
But you hated it as a child. You did not want to go there. What was so awful about the lakefront of Michigan?
Okay, well, the party thing that I just mentioned was what the grown folks did, and then what we as teenagers would sneak and do, so that was called up on the island, as they would call it. But what happened was my family really was protective of me, my sister. I had one other female cousin, and then I had 10 male cousins. And so they purchased lakefront property. At the time, I didn't know that's what it was, and built cottages up there. But the day that school got out in mid-June until Labor Day, we were sent there with our grandmother as the babysitter. So the boys kind of liked going up there because, they horseshoed and swam in boats and fished. But the girls, we didn't really like it because it took us away from the neighborhood in our community.
You wanted to hang out.
Yeah, we wanted to stay home.
Okay.
So
poor Marilyn is distressed because she's on the lakefront. And then meanwhile, poor Faye is in Philly, and I'm distressed. And I'm distressed because I am manually cutting up onions for our sandwiches for our family's hoagie shop. And I know in my heart I should be having fun, but I did not even have the imagination.
I had no idea that
front dreams.
I had no idea that we were privileged. No idea. It was many, many years later that I learned that was a privilege. It was a rite of passage. When I graduated from high school, that meant I never had to go there again, and didn't for many years.
Wow. So your parents are providing an example to you of how to work your way up in the middle class, up the ladder, how to vacation in the process. Were there other influential women in your life?
Oh, yes. I grew up in the church, and there are a lot of women at the church that many we called auntie, or claimed them as relatives, but they maybe were not. So women in the community, in particular, as I look at it now, one of the women that had a great impact on me was Hortense Kennedy, who ended up being I think she was I can't remember, but she was the national president of Delta Sigma Theta. But at the time we were growing up as kids, she was just growing up in the sorority. And so I had a lot of role models. I was active. My mother was very active in the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women. And so I grew up as a BNP kid. And so there were lots of women around that were surrogate relatives.
You went on to pledge Delta Sigma Theta.
I sure did.
So you were a church girl. What church did you go to? And
we went to
church activities.
Okay, we went to Friendship Baptist Church. But I'll tell you this. One of the things I remember most about church in Lansing in my early years was the ritual, the Saturday before. And what that was getting my hair done, sitting in between either my mother's legs or my grandmother's legs with the pressing comb, and they're burning me and I'm crying and they're saying, don't cry. And really, I think it was a form of child abuse. But that went on for years and years and years. So Saturday was a big day for all of us getting ready for church on Sunday. And our family was very connected with the church. So on Sunday, the pastor was going to somebody in my family's house for dinner. So we'd be preparing for that. It might be my grandmother, one of my aunts, or our house. And we were very active in BTU, was a Baptist Training Union.
Baptist Training Union.
Yes, yeah. But we had a little mischief going on too. I think my first kiss was in the basement of the church.
Oh, so now you're in high school. Did you have any influential Black teachers?
I've never had a Black teacher in my life at all. Never, ever. My whole formal education, I never had a Black teacher. I had a Black homeroom teacher, but never a formal teacher. And that was African American. So when I was growing up, my father was very ill. He had heart disease, and I lied about my age when I was 14, so I could get a job because when my father was ill, my mother was struggling, and it was at a store, something like a Kmart's now. I was a cashier. It was a grand opening of this store. And so I worked and I became head cashier.
Of course.
And they found out after I had become head cashier that I had lied about my age. And they called me in the office. They were very, very upset with me. And they said, why did you lie to us? Our insurance won't cover you. And then they went on to tell me, but they were in a bind. They couldn't let me go because I was the best they had.
Of course.
So it taught me a lot about lying, but it also taught me about work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that if you do a good job,
Creative value.
that it could pay off. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you doing in school? It's the 1960s and the world is changing. You were working? Did you have any high school activities?
Well, at the beginning of my high school activities, I really was not focused on going to college. So I was in the Future Homemakers of America. I could type and take shorthand real well. So I thought I would probably be a secretary. And I was somewhat athletic. And I can't say I was involved, but maybe not a real leader. Well, I guess not a real leader in the formal sense, but maybe an influencer because
An influencer.
Our house was where everybody was between my sister and I. We were the meeting place. So we were very, very busy, very popular. We liked to dance. We liked to roller skate. And so in Lansing, as a group of Black people, we never went to the big city of Detroit, which was the closest big city, but we went to smaller cities around us like Albion, Battle Creek, Jackson. So we roller skated a lot. And academically, you know, I was an average student. And the goal then was, you know, be a good girl, just don't get pregnant.
Right. Well, you told me that you wanted to get married so you could have sex.
Right, that's right. I was told that if you want to have sex, you got to be married. So I was dating a guy that came home from the service as I was a senior in high school, and he wanted to marry me, and I wanted to get married and have sex, and I didn't want to go to college. But you know, that was not the plan of my family.
Yeah. So you get a gift as a graduation present that changes your life. What was that gift?
Yes, I graduate from high school, and one of the gifts that I got from my family was, and my mother escorted me to the 1964 National Urban League Conference in Washington, D.C. And that was the first time I'd been on an airplane. And it was the first time I had been around a sea of influential Black people. And I happened to meet a gentleman there at that time that had already graduated from Southern Illinois University. But for some kind of way, we hung out. And it was dashiki wearing. I can remember I had a dashiki. He had on dashiki, and there were all these parties. And he was telling me, oh, no, you got to go to college because these are my frat brothers. And, you know, you'll have a good time. And so it gave me a larger vision of the world, but it also gave me a larger vision of civil rights and the need for leadership and some of the issues at the time. And it gave me a larger perspective of, you know, what my parents were going about. I remember in 1963, you know, the year before I graduated, that was when, you know, Kennedy was assassinated. And I remember that that was the first time I had seen my mother really break down and cry.
Emotion.
Yeah. And so it really kind of sealed the deal for me. And how I ended up in college, you know, going to court reporting school. Actually, I had shared earlier that my father worked at the Capitol, and he knew several of the senators there, and that they had court reporters and that they made a lot of money. And so, of course, you know, money was the value. They wanted me to make money, and I could type and take shorthand. So they planned for me to go to court reporting school, but at the time we didn't have the money. But my father did die in 1963, just before I graduated in 1964. And I was able to go to college on his veterans benefits.
Okay. So now you're in college and you are at Ferris State College up in rural Big Rapids, Michigan.
Right, another rural place.
Another rural place, really small Black student population. Um, but there was an irony that related to Idlewild about you being there.
Um, about
Yeah, you had been trying to escape being in that area, and now you were back there.
Oh yeah, okay. Now I'm back there. Yeah, yeah. Well, I went there because that was the state school that was certified to teach court reporting, and that was the first time I had been around so many Black people from Detroit and the Pontiac area. And what I learned very quickly was I was around Black people that had never been around white people. So I had grown up with white people and I knew how to interact with white people, but they had grown up in Black environments and they were really struggling with white people. Ferris had some very liberal admission standards. And so there are a lot of people that they gave a chance. And a lot of them, just stayed in the union, played bid whist, and they were there for one
Like
semester. Yeah. But I actually stayed there, graduated, and but it was that was my first experience of meeting Black people from different environments.
From different environments. Well, were you militant at all? Had the civil rights movement moved to campus?
Well, yes, it did. Remember, the riots, were in 1967. And just recently, I was talking to some friends. We were there. I did not go to jail, but many of my friends did because there was a civil disturbance. And we were just talking about how concerned our parents had to be for us because we were naive. We're just kind of going with the flow there. And so that was when afros became popular. I remember, converting from a French perm to an afro, being real involved in issues, and really, really looking at the world from a much larger perspective.
Yes. So you graduate from Ferris. You have a double major in business administration and court reporting.
Right.
How do you get to Detroit?
Well, I was recruited to Detroit because that was 1967 when they had the civil disturbance. And by 1969, all of those cases started coming to trial. And so at that time, the court was looking to integrate its rank of court reporters. There were only a few before me. And so they recruited me from Big Rapids and sent me to Detroit to work in the criminal courts to help with the backload of criminal cases that came about as a result, of the disturbance.
Did you know anybody in Detroit?
Didn't know anybody. I had an aunt that lived here. I had met people that had come through Ferris. So, I had distant relatives, but in terms of friends, no. I was thrown into an environment that I didn't know anything about. So
where'd you live?
I lived at the Evangeline Residence for Women. And that was a safe haven, for women.
For women, yeah.
Yeah. And I took the bus every day to the court. And at that time, there were very few Black judges and very few Black lawyers. So many of the people that later became my friends, we kind of grew up together, the lawyers, judges, and it was good. My first case there, I think I shared with you, was a real militant, radical, political leader in Detroit had called a judge a white racist hunky pig. And that was the first case I had. And just the language, first of all, and then the media attention. And then if you're familiar with what court reporters do, the court reporter is the one that sits there and writes down everything they say. And then they say, court reporter, read that back. And I wasn't seasoned enough or assured enough to stop people and say, hey, you gotta stop, because I'm trying to get this. I hadn't commanded control.
Mm-hmm. Did
And
you feel overwhelmed?
I was overwhelmed, scared of losing my job, kind of it was just bigger than what I had imagined. And I can remember one day being in my office crying because I was just overwhelmed. And at the time, they had just appointed a Black undersheriff. And he came to me and says, Marilyn, look, we're leaders. You can't let these white folks see you cry. He said, you cry afterwards. He said, but you just sit in there, do what you got to do. And he helped me to feel comfortable about being in control, and taking charge.
What other memorable cases did you have?
Well, I had the Black Panther cases. I had several of those cases that came to trial. I had a sensational murder case. I had lots of police brutality cases. Mm-hmm. And really saw the injustice. It's amazing. You can sit in a courtroom and you hear from the plaintiff side, and you hear all the facts, and then you hear from the defendant side, and it's the whole different set of facts. And then just the whole dynamics of the political system. I worked for one judge for many years. We became very, very close. And to us, it was just case after another. And, those attorneys would come, but again, they may fight in court, but when that case is over, they're friends again. Mm-hmm. And so just learning how the system worked. As a court reporter, you sit there and you write everything phonetically. Mm-hmm. And so, your mind is just hearing the sounds and many times not paying attention to the content, but to the phonetics of it.
Gotcha. But then you decide that you don't want to be a court reporter anymore. And for those of you who are listening, we who have parents who didn't go to college, if you get a job and it's not manual labor and it's a government job, you never quit your good government job. So you decide that you don't want to be a court reporter anymore, and you start telling people that. And what is the response?
Well, I had zero support because the value is how much money you make. And I made lots of money. At that time, it was not regulated. As a court reporter, you were there getting a salary, and then you were also paid by each page that you typed. And so one attorney could order a copy of the transcript, and then you could turn around and call the other attorneys on the case and say, do you want a copy? And they would say, yeah. So actually you're charging 3 people for the same work.
Nice
yeah, so it was really good, a lot of money. I could make a bunch of money over the weekend. But it did not allow me to do what I love to do, and that's talk, be in communication with others. And so basically my life was sitting in court, taking hearings all day long, and then coming home all night and weekends transcribing. So I figured there had to be more to life than that. And I decided that I wanted to venture out into something else.
Something else. Well, about this time, I arrive in Detroit, and I'm in the mix because I come to be a National Urban Fellows intern in Mayor Coleman Young's office, and you're in the mix. And so we mix and we bond and we start hanging out. And I remember you telling me that you decided that you're going to turn court reporting into a business, so you don't have to sit there and do the actual court reporting. So talk to us about that.
Well, first of all, let's really acknowledge the Coleman Young days. Those were really some good days.
They were great days.
Yeah, many of us got together. There was a sense of community, a sense of Blacks coming together, doing great things. Coleman was one of a kind. And he was instrumental in pulling a lot of us together. So actually, what happened was I decided I want to be a court reporter, sitting in the court. So I started a court reporting business. But along the lines of trying to figure out what was wrong, because I wasn't happy and I was making money, people were making me think something was wrong with me because I wanted to leave. So I started attending seminars like, where do you go with your life? Or if you don't know where you're going, you end up someplace else. So I became very skilled in knowing how to write resumes, knowing how to interview, and begin to figure my life out for myself. At the same time, I began to help other people do it, and was able to get contracts to do it for corporate America. At the time, American Tech, the automotives, and was able to start, a pretty generous small business.
Yeah, yeah. So you're in both the political and the business mix, and you've really become a leadership speaker and a coach, and you get a contract with Mademoiselle magazine. What was that contract for?
Okay, well, at that time, women were just re-entering the workforce, and there was a big push on helping women. So I would get contracts like with the University of Women, a lot of women's organizations, and also organizations that had women's interest groups within the organization. And so Mademoiselle, and as well as Glamour Magazine, they used to send me to malls to talk to women about getting your best life. And at that time, I remember there was another African-American woman named Michelle Wallace, who had written the book Black Myth,
Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. And the Superwoman, very controversial.
Yeah. And so we got together, and I was able to bring her to Michigan to talk to other African-American women. So I got a lot of
Black women entrepreneurs.
Well, yeah, the start of Black Women Entrepreneurs, a couple things. That was the start of it. And then remember, I had said to you earlier, I was a BNPer, Business and Professional Women. And I had a girlfriend who owned pizza franchises. She was one of the first African-American women that owned pizza franchises. And I wanted her to join BNP. And they said, no, she has to work for a company. She's got to work for a company that for she's a professional within inside a company. I'm like, well, no, she owns her own. Well, at that time, there was no provision for an entrepreneur to be part of that organization. It's since changed, of course. So with that in mind, I didn't think that was fair. And then when we brought Michelle Wallace to town, I teamed up with another friend of mine, and she was a marketing expert. And we invited a lot of women that had also contacted me over the years because I was very visible doing things for women. It was kind of a novelty, an African-American women showing up in some of the places I was showing up. And anyway, at that event, we had over 200 women show up. And
how much did it cost?
And they paid $25 to come. And at the last minute, when we were putting the marketing materials together, I didn't want to say that it was me putting it together. And my colleague did not want to use her name either. So we just went, out of the blue, said, well, let's just call ourselves Black Women Entrepreneurs. So we said, Black Women Entrepreneurs, sponsors, come out and bring your checks. So we had over 200 women show up. We collected the checks, and it was on a Saturday. Monday, we took the checks to the bank, and lo and behold, we had no bank account in the name of Black Women Entrepreneurs. So that just shows you our naivety. We were doing a lot of things very naively, but thank God for the Black Bank who was able to come to our aid and encourage us to move forward. Now, at that time, also, the Black Enterprise and Essence Magazine had started, during those years, but they had never met their audience. So I was having events through the National Association of Black Women Entrepreneurs would bring their audience together. So they came to me, both Essence and Black Enterprise, and said, can we sponsor your event? Green again. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, what does that mean? They said, well, we want to give you money to bring the people here. And I'm like, well, why would you want to give me money? And I know they was like clueless. So that's how we really got started. And I really wasn't committed to starting an organization until I met Earl Graves at one of our events. And I thought that Earl could help me. And he said, Marilyn, no, you need to go ahead and start the organization because, there's not an organization out here like that.
I can remember so many fun times. There was a whole group of us who was kind of like your ad hoc Black Women Entrepreneurs Advisory Committee, and we would plan these events, and internet cafes became a big deal, and we wanted to be cutting edge. So we decided we needed an internet cafe, except we really didn't know what it was.
Well, Faye, you got to take ownership for that now. That was your idea. I remember that. Faye came up with the bright idea of saying, let's have this internet cafe. I thought it was going to happen. And we didn't know what it was. But anyway, lo and behold, God intervened as he always does. We were downtown at the Westin Hotel. We always, went big, either convention center or a big hotel. And FedEx Kinko's had opened up a new office there. And we had Wally Amos that year. I don't know if you remember from Famous Amos Cookie.
Famous Amos, the cookie entrepreneur and motivational speaker.
Yeah. And so what we did, we brought them, again, the audience. They were really happy to have us there because they could show off their new internet capabilities. So we had coffees and milk with Famous Amos at our internet cafe.
Yeah.
So there were always people around, like you said, that supported my dreams and visions. Our friend Leslie Sappers was one of those. She'd always say, well, Marilyn, that's a good idea, but where are we going to get the money to do this? And I'm like, and I might say, even at that time, and this is kind of pre us, being associated with Chrysler. I remember there was something I wanted to do to get sponsorship from Chrysler. And I had not been exposed to corporate America before, but I knew that Iacocca was the president or CEO of Chrysler, so call Iacocca. So that's what we did. Got in touch with Iacocca. And Chrysler became one of our sponsors. And of course, GM Ford followed. So those were good times. We started out with about 12 women. And remember, this was pre social media, and then grew to a network of over 5,000.
Wow. Name some of the other famous. We talked about Famous Amos, but other famous people came to the event.
Oh, yeah. We had Lola Falana. Remember, Lola Falana had been on Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. And then she had been stricken with multiple sclerosis. And so she wanted to tell the story about, how being the sexiest woman in the world did not have meaning once you've been ill. We had Phyllis Hyman, Bobby Humphreys. We had Naomi Sims, the model.
Sure.
And they all wanted to be known as business women. People knew their art and their craft, but they did not know them, as business women.
From the business side.
Yeah, and so we were able to attract really, really great women. And then one of the biggest attractors that came into my life as I was doing that was my own mentor, who was Esther Gordy Edwards, the sister of Berry Gordy and the founder of the Motown Museum.
Yes.
And so early on, she was trying to get a book published by Pops Gordy and needed help. And she saw me do what I was doing with Black Women Entrepreneurs. And again, I didn't know I was doing anything. I was pure naivety, just being of service, helping my people, my sisters. And so she asked me if I would help her get her father's book out. And then, unbeknownst to me, she just started doing wonderful, wonderful things. So she had been on many, many boards. And what she did was when she resigned from boards or her term was up, she recommended that I serve. So, I served on the Book Catalog Hotel in Michigan, the Detroit Economic Growth Organization. And it was very, very good time for me. So I had lots of support in my endeavors. And I remember the Coleman Young days as being very, very fine days. And I guess the other thing too, 1983, I was the Michigan chair for the Jesse Jackson for President campaign, 1984. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. When I was asked to do that, I told Reverend Jackson at the time, Reverend, I've never done anything like this before. And he said, neither have I. So it was the blind, leading the blind, but I learned a lot during that time. And then went on, to serve on the Clinton Gore transition team, also on the U.S. Small Business Administration Board, and did a lot of work with Perrin Mitchell, from the Senate. So did a lot during the Carter administration, as well as the Clinton administration.
In the midst of all that, you wrote a book.
Yeah, in the midst of all that, I wrote a book. Sisters Cashing In, How Every Woman Can Make Her Financial Dream Come True. And what I talk about there is how to create freedom, wealth, and power. And begin to just look at, the learnings from my own life and what I was learning from other women, over the years. So that was a good time.
You went on to have other businesses. I think you had a few fast food franchises.
Yeah. Remember I went into corporate America in 1990 and started a corporate career, a very corporate career. My background, I then became very interested in large scale change. And so I got a master's degree in organization development and training. And then I got a PhD while I was working for healthcare and metaphysics. I became very interested in the functioning of the mind, body, and spirit. So I was able to work around healthy community and looking at the components that make people well, looking at wellness. So that allowed me to kind of stay put, but I still have the entrepreneurial spirit. So early on, my then husband and I had owned some Burger King franchises. And then in the 1990s, my son and I owned Church's Chicken franchises and invested in a few other things.
Well, Marilyn, this was such a full conversation and we left out a lot. We left out all the details of all the parties, the time that you went to go see Aretha Franklin. Such good times. So now you're retired. And you are the matriarch of your family.
Yes, I am.
And you now live in rural Ocala, Florida, coming full circle with your rural heritage. How did your family or you come to pick Ocala?
Well, my family did a great job at their generation planning retirement. Before they retired, they bought the property, up in northern Michigan. When they retired, they sold their homes in Michigan and lived in northern Michigan for a few years. And that allowed them to buy Florida property. And then they lived in Florida in the winter and Michigan in the summer. And then as they grew older, they sold the properties, and several of my cousins still own property up north, and then they moved to Florida. So I actually had 8 uncles, 8 relatives. My my mom and then my mom's sisters and their husbands, who all moved to Ocala, Florida. They had vision, back then, and died here. And so I um, inherited the last family house in Ocala, Florida.
Nice.
And at the time that I was here to kind of get rid of, their lives here, I began to think about it was retirement time for me. Maybe I need to do this. So that brought me here, and I feel really at home.
Yeah. And you like to play golf?
Love golf. I'm loving the game, and wish I could see it's getting better. But yeah, I love the peace, tranquility. And Ocala's in Central Florida. We're an hour north of Orlando. So it's in a place where I'm close enough to do other things as I desire.
Now, you retired, but you didn't stop working completely. I think you told me you set up a consulting business.
Yes. I after I retired, I became a caregiver for many family and friends. It's kind of like there are so many people that were on their deathbed. They'd all say, "Oh, call Marilyn. I can't do this without her." So I stepped up to the plate, not knowing that I was a caregiver. I was just kind of doing what I do because I had worked in, the healthcare environment for 20 years and I knew how to work the system. But anyway, that experience of helping people through advanced illness and death I didn't know it at the time, but gave me some experiences that have been marketable. So now I'm working as a caregiving consultant, helping people to prepare for advanced illness and end of life.
Wow. So as we close, Marilyn, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Well, Faye, first of all, I want to thank you and Jerome for inviting me, and to tell you that as we begin to think about this, over the last several weeks, I really believe I see how everything is connected, and as you asked me about my ancestors, the Curly and Elnora, who are my grandparents, and Lester Mabel, who are my parents. I'm just so grateful to them for their vision. And I really see the connectivity between vision and legacy, and the power of vision and legacy, because I can feel their spirit, as we're having these conversations. And I'm really feeling like I'm living the legacy as part of the vision that both my grandparents and parents had for their children. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank, like again, Curly and Eleanor and Mabel and Lester, for life, and I hope that I'm serving them well.
Well, I would say that you are your ancestors' wildest dreams come true. This has been such a treat. Thanks again, Marilyn. I'll be back again in May, so mark your calendars. The founder of Black Girl Collective will join me, and we're going to be talking about a book. So all you readers, we'll be discussing The Three Mothers by Anna Malika Tubbs, and it's about the mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. And also, all you 1960s people, dust off your copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X, because in May, there will be several discussions by the 1960s Project about Malcolm X. Next month, the series is called Future Scenarios. So if you're wondering what's on Jerome's mind about future scenarios, please tune in. Of course, if you enjoyed this, share it all over social media. We'd really appreciate it. It's Women's History Month, and we'd like to do a special shout out to Ty Brooks and Kenya Farmer. They are our two women who are the production team behind the scenes. Finally, on behalf of the 1960s Project, on behalf of What's on Jerome's Mind, on behalf of Marilyn French Hubbard, and of course, on behalf of me, thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'll see you in May.